everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So for today's video, it's going to be a little bit different than my usual vlogs again. This is going to be another little sit down chit chat kind of video, but this one is going to be more informative and more targeted to, I guess, a specific audience. So today's video is going to be all about postgrad applications, and specifically for law, so for LLMs and Masters of Law. So I am currently a recent graduate from the Uni of Kent, and I did the LLB at Kent, and I am now in the process of starting my LLM, and I'm going to be starting literally in a few days. Today is Friday. I'm going to be starting on Monday, and I'm going to be doing the LLM there with the specialism in human rights law. So if you want to do something similar to that, this will be a very useful video. But this video will also be very useful for any other area of not just law but any other subjects as well, as I'm sure the application process will be very similar, if not identical, to what I did. So I applied in my last year of my undergrad, so that was a year ago today, to start this September. So I'm gonna basically talk about the whole process, and I think this will be a very useful video because last year, like a year ago today, I was very clueless as to what the process was. I didn't really know anyone who was older than me who already went through the process, who I could get advice from. So I hope this video can help those people and help you if you need some advice, some tips. So I'm going to go through basically the whole application process, as well as some tips and tricks of what I wish I knew when I was applying for masters. So I've literally compiled a whole list of things that I thought would be very useful. So first of all, the thing I want to cover a little bit is about deciding to actually do your masters, because I think that's the first step it takes before you get yourself involved and busy with the application process, because you really want to make sure that it's something that you really want to do. And I'm sure everyone will say this to you when you are applying or thinking of applying, is that you really need to make sure that it's something you want to do, and that you won't jump into something like a master's, which is time consuming, financially consuming, unless you're quite certain it's something you want to do. When I just started my final year of my undergrad, I was obviously, like most final year students, thinking about what I wanted to do next after I graduated. And for me, the options were obviously to find a job, to seek work experience, or I could do a master's. So doing a master's was always kind of an option that I had in the back of my mind, but I never took it seriously until final year, because I don't think you really need to think about it too much until your final year, unless you have always wanted to do one, especially because I think it takes a while for you to really decide, because for me it didn't take until the end of my second year to my third year to realize which areas of the law that I actually found interesting, and that is what kind of pushed me to kind of think about it more seriously. Thinking of doing a master's, think about obviously the modules and subjects that you did in your undergrad and which ones you found interesting, which ones you could see yourself studying further, because obviously when you start to research courses and stuff like that, there is such a spectrum of different courses that you can take just for law. You can do, the general LLM, or you can do a specialism, and a lot of people do a specialism because that's the main reason I feel like most people want to go into a master's, is to do a area of law that they really want to carry on studying. Whatever reason it is that you want to do a master's, you want to make sure that it's like obviously strong enough for you to spend that much money and spend that much time on it. Especially because you can always do a master's much later in life. Obviously, when you go to master's level, a lot of the students are of different ages and different stages of their life. A lot of people do their masters a lot later after they've gotten a job and they decide, I want to specialize in this area after doing work in this area. So really have a think about it. Talk to your careers advisor, talk to your professors, talk to people who you think will give you really sound advice. And yeah, once you decide you really want to do it, that's the time that you can really get on with your applications and everything. So yeah, after talking to my careers advisor, she advised that a lot of kind of the career ambitions that I wanted to achieve a lot of the times require a master's. So that's another reason, another factor into me deciding to do it, as well as I think a master's, especially if you specialize in a certain area, is a great way for you to be surrounded with like-minded people who enjoy the same things as you. So I'm very excited for that, because in my undergrad I did like human rights law, and my human rights class was my favorite class because everyone in that class, you could tell like you kind of all chose that module for the same reason. Like you all my classmates, everyone in that class and my professor, we all cared about the same things. We all cared about human rights, justice, and all those kinds of things. So I figured that if that was, you know, I really enjoyed that, I really want, I could get that same thing for my whole course if I did a master's. So those are some of the reasons. Obviously you have your own reasons to do it as well. So let's move on now to the next part, which is researching schools and courses. So I think this part might be like the most time consuming part before like applying. And so it's so important for you to research schools, but not just the schools. You need to research the course itself. So when I was doing research, I was kind of in between two types of courses. I was thinking of doing public international law as a course, and then human rights law was also another course that I was interested in. So when I came to researching schools, I made a list of schools that had both of those courses. So some schools I applied for were for public international law, some schools I applied for were for human rights law. And so the kind of criteria I used to picking which schools I wanted to apply for was obviously, was it a good school for the course that I wanted? Was it a location that I wanted to live or study in? And also obviously financially, scholarships, all the kind of criteria you would look for when you were doing your undergrad. It's kind of the same process. When I was researching, I made a whole list of all the schools that did the course that I wanted to do. And then after that, I kind of chose which schools I wanted to apply for. So I narrowed them down. And I would say at this stage, what's really good is talking to your professors, especially the ones who teach or specialize in the course that you want to apply for, because they will have really sound knowledge of kind of which schools are kind of more like their different teaching styles, basically, because every institution kind of teaches differently. So really, if you have access to your professors, really talk to them, because they have most likely, because they're professors, uni lecturers, they most likely have done a master's. So it's good to kind of research which faculty members that are in your current school, which institutions they went to, because I found a lot of my professors that taught me actually did courses that I was very interested in and institutions that I wanted to apply for. You need to look at the modules, especially because there might be two different institutions that both do a course called human rights law, but they might actually have completely different modules, and you will have completely different, you know, things to learn in both. So look at which ones you find interesting, and yeah, go from there. So from my experience, I kind of had quite a big list. I think like maybe 7 different schools. So for some of the schools, there were like 2 programs that I would be interested in. Oh my god. I know some schools I had like 2 courses that I would be interested in. So I really had to like think about which course I wanted to apply for, because some schools only let you apply for 1. So in the end, I wanted to apply for about like 4 different schools, and then in the end I only applied to 3. So the 3 that I applied for was Leiden University, which is in the Netherlands, Brussels School of International Studies, which is in Brussels, and then also the last one was UCL. So now looking back at it, I'm quite surprised that I only applied to 1 UK uni. I thought I would have applied to more, but one of the other reasons I really wanted to do a master's because I really wanted to study abroad, and I've always wanted to study abroad since before my undergrad, but I wasn't able to get into a course that offered like a year abroad. So I was thinking about it in my final year, and I was like, this is a perfect opportunity for me to go abroad for a year. So that's why I applied to 2 international schools. And the reasons why I chose those 3 is because they were kind of the top unis for the course I wanted. So for me, like, I really wanted to get into Leiden. That was my number 1 choice, and then I think UCL and Brussels were kind of like together. So I always thought I was gonna go to Leiden, but in the end I chose UCL. So the application process for all 3 of those unis are quite similar. They vary a little bit, but all in all, the process is quite simple actually, but some unis might require some things that others don't, and vice versa. So the general kind of like application structure would be, you would first apply through like a form or make like an applicant account through the university's website. Through there, the first kind of application stuff that you do would be like add your details, so like your name, address, contact details, education history, stuff like that, all the basic kind of stuff. And then on those application accounts, so you'll need to make like a password and email. So then on those application accounts would add your CV, your personal statement, references, transcript. So those are kind of the main requirements that you need to have to apply to most universities. So that was a requirement for all 3 of those unis. The only one that differed was UCL, and they required an additional written piece or written work. I think it was, I can't remember how many words, I think around 800 or 500 words of like a written piece of like an area that you are interested in the law. And that was quite interesting because the other unis didn't require that, but that's like the basic requirements that you need. So it's quite easy to do the first step, which is like applying, adding your contact details and everything. What you really need to apply and put your effort in is your personal statement, and yeah, your personal statement. So your personal statement, you'll need to make one for each university you apply for. So if you apply to more than one, you need to make more than one personal statement, which is different from undergrad, because for undergrad you only made one personal statement, I think, if I can remember. But anyways, since I applied for 3, I made 3 different ones. However, they didn't really change drastically in terms of the structure itself. They only changed really in terms of the content. So the personal statement that I made really differed actually from the 3 different institutions that I made. The one I made for Leiden, it was a much longer personal statement, the number of characters that they required. So for Leiden, my personal statement was a lot more personal, a lot more kind of a lot more about me, and a lot more like of like an American personal statement type, if you understand what that means. So I talked a lot more about my background, who I am, my ambitions, reasons why I want to study there and stuff like that. UCL and BSIS were a bit more similar in terms of they were a shorter word count, so I talked less about too much of that and talked more, it was a lot more like concise and like straight to the point. But all of my personal statements included why I want to study law, that specific course at that specific institution, what has helped me so far, and what has made me a good candidate for that place at that university, at that course. So I talked about any work experience I've done, hobbies, society, roles that I've done in uni, volunteering, all of that stuff. So basically talking about your CV, but more tailoring it more to why that makes you a good master's student. Because I think this is what my careers advisor told me. She told me like when you are at master's level, they want to see that you're like a go-getter. Basically they want to see that you're going to be like that type of student who really is going to be involved and engrossed in that course, because it's just a different level from undergrad. So it has to be very much like why this course and why this uni and why me, basically. So those are the things that I would add. I'm gonna turn on the light actually, it's a bit dark. Those are kind of like the things I would definitely include, and work with your careers advisor and the resources you have at your uni, because they will have good advice as to what to include, what not to include, what's relevant and what's not. But I think what's really important is to be concise, especially for the UCL application. You can't be too like wordy, and you need to like be more straightforward basically with your points and your reasonings. So basically you really need to tailor every single personal statement to the university. It's kind of like a cover letter when you apply for firms, in the sense that you really need to tailor each one to each university, because you can't write stuff that are too generic that you can write about any other university. Like you can't write something like, I want to go to this university to do this master's program because the professors really are, you know, the best of the best, because you could say that about any institution. So you really want to say specifically. This is where you kind of need to use your research to tailor each application. So for example, for UCL is like the #1 international uni in London, so they really care about having a global perspective, an international perspective. So that's what I used for my application for UCL. For Leiden is like one of the oldest and one of the best unis for public international law. So I talked about why I loved public international law in undergrad and what I learned from that and why I want to do that at Leiden. And if you are a UK student and you want to apply to a master's uni abroad, obviously a really good reason you can use is that you want to be engrossed in that culture, be surrounded by, you know, international people and everything like that. So there's a lot of reasons why you would want to choose like specific unis and specific courses. So you really need to keep that in mind when you're making your application. So yeah, and every like reason that you give, you need to back that up. So like, for example, for Leiden, I said like, I really want to go to this university for this course because I really like the pro bono opportunities that Leiden has, the proximity to these international institutions like the ICJ, ICC that I studied in undergrad and that I feel like I would benefit from really well if I was studying in that environment. A tip I would have is to reach out to like the master's admissions team and stuff like that, because when I was applying, for example, for UCL, I had a lot of questions about like the written work and stuff like that. So just contact them, and they were quite accommodating. So always reach out for help. You don't have to do everything by yourself and just guess. So definitely do that. Another part of the application process is references, and I feel like this is probably like one of the most stressful and like, yeah, one of the most stressful parts of the application process, because when I was applying for my master's, like my friends were also applying for further study, so I knew a lot of people who were doing that. And when you're a finalist, most people are obviously applying to jobs or further study, which you will need and require a reference from. So a lot of people who were kind of stressed about trying to get a reference. So when you are applying for the unis, you need to keep an eye on like how many references each uni required, because some unis want you to have 2 references, some only require 1. So you really need to at least have 2 references, like definite, which will enable you to apply. So when I was doing my referencing, I can literally look back now and like I remember how stressed I was trying to find references and trying to get references, because obviously if you don't have enough or you don't have any, you're not going to be able to apply. So it's kind of a process because you have to like chase down your professors and stuff, but definitely reach out to your lecturers and everything. So when you are applying, this is also another reason why you need to try and apply as soon as possible, or like as early as you can, because it will give more time for your references as well to make your reference, and they won't feel rushed. And if they feel like they don't have enough time, a lot of them won't do a reference for you. The moment you know you want to do your masters and you start applying, that's when you should really notify your references or potential references as soon as possible. So when I was applying for my masters and I was thinking of like who could be my reference, when it's a masters, it really needs to be like, definitely needs to be like someone who has taught you, someone who is like a professor or a lecturer or a tutor. It can't really be like someone like a personal reference. I would recommend thinking of like 4 or 5 people that could be potential references for you. Reason being is most unis, the maximum references would be like 2. So if you ask like 4 or 5 people, there is definitely gonna be some people who won't do it. So the more people you ask, obviously, the more chances there are of someone to definitely say yes. So for me, I asked a total of, I think 4 people, and then 3 of them agreed to do it for me. And then in the end, I only got 2 because one of them didn't have enough time and was too busy with work. So I ended up getting 2, luckily I had enough references. And you need to really be smart about who you want to do your reference. You can't just pick like any person that has taught you, obviously. You need to pick someone who you have somewhat of a good relationship with, and actually have somewhat of a relationship with. So you can't just ask someone who has taught you maybe for a few weeks and then probably forgot your name, because they're not going to write a good letter of reference for you. They might not even reply to you. So you really need to make sure you pick someone that you know that you have a good rapport with, and that can write you a nice reference. And they also gave me advice during the process. So this is why it's so important to have good relationships with your uni lecturers, seminar leaders, and tutors and stuff like that. Most of the people that I asked to do my reference were my second year teachers. I only asked for one person who was my third year teacher, because most of my third year teachers, this was still during like autumn time, so most of them didn't know me as much as well. So I recommend asking past teachers unless you have a really good relationship with someone now, because the time frame that you're doing your master's applications is quite early in the year. So if you have a new teacher in third year, they might not agree to do it for you because they don't know you. Once you've thought about who you want to write your reference, is to send them a nice email basically saying like, hi, I hope you're well, I'm now in my third year and I am in your class for human rights, or I was in your class for equity and trusts, and I really enjoyed your class and it has pushed me to pursue a master's or to pursue further study. I wanted to ask if you be willing to be a reference for me for my master's applications. And then after that, you want to kind of put a list of universities and courses you want to apply for. So you want to state where you want to apply and kind of just be really nice about it, obviously, because these teachers don't have to make a reference for you. Obviously, it's part of their job, but they also have a pile of workload as well to deal with. So a lot of them might say no, a lot of them might not even reply to you. But if you are really nice about it and very respectful, a lot of them are very willing to help. Write a nice first email. You don't have to say too much in the first email because they might not even agree, but you want to just state like who you are, because you need to remind them like which student you are, because obviously they might not remember. So tell them like, I was in your class last year, or I'm in your class last term for XYZ, and I'm interested in applying to these courses. Would you be willing to be my reference? So after that first email, they will either not reply to you, say no, or say yes. So if they do say yes, they'll usually ask for your CV, your draft personal statement, and like a time frame of like roughly which deadlines they need to be mindful of. So definitely notify them a good few months in advance before you need to get your applications in. So for the different unis, they're gonna have obviously application windows, and for UCL as well. I remember UCL had like a deadline for the references, so you can get all of your application done and sent off, but the uni is not gonna consider it until your references are both sent out. So this is again why it's so important to try and apply as early as possible, because it's just going to be less stress on you, less stress on your references, and if they have more time, obviously they're going to write a better reference for you. I think that's honestly the most stressful part. The only other thing you need to add onto your application is your transcript, and your transcript you can get, I got mine from my uni website. You can download it, and they'll ask for your transcript from first and second year. So the courses I applied for, two of them were a requirement of a 2-1 / like a high 2-1, and then one of them required a first. So you really need to keep in mind what that requirement is for which uni, so then you can kind of see if you're on track to that grade, or if you're already on track to a 2-1 or a first. And if they see on your transcript obviously that you have potential and you are on track to getting either a 2-1 or a first, your transcript shouldn't be a problem. So yeah. Another thing I want to talk about is scholarships and funding. So this is a really important aspect when you're thinking of applying for a master's. A lot of unis obviously do scholarships, so I would say every single one that you apply for, you want to be mindful and write down like every single scholarship that you are eligible for, because that is like opportunity for you to save money, because obviously a master's is quite expensive, especially if you do it abroad. So you want to be mindful of where you can save as much money as possible, and also the deadlines, because a lot of scholarships have deadlines, so you need to do that. And I think a lot of scholarships as well have like, you need to do another like statement as to why you should be chosen for the scholarship and stuff. As for UK students, if you're going to a UK uni to do your masters, you can apply for student finance again, but student finance doesn't cover your tuition fees. It only covers like a loan. It's called a master's loan. My last few like tips and tricks are really to, I've kept saying this, but to apply as early as you can. I'd say around, like, you don't have to really apply straight in September, but you also need to be mindful of, because it's your final year, like which times of the year you're going to be the most busy. Because for me, like December, January time was very busy for me, and obviously March time for more assignments and stuff. So be mindful of your deadlines, your actual uni deadlines. The second tip I said already, which is to have good relationships with your professors. And the last thing I would kind of advise is that you shouldn't feel too pressured with the whole application and master's process. You need to really consider and take time to think about if it's something that you really want to do, because you might like apply and get in and then realize you don't really want to do it. So think about, really have clear reasons, whether that be personal, professionally, why you want to do it. So because you might be doing your masters like in the middle of the year and thinking, why am I doing this? So if you have clear reasons and you know what those are, you're going to be able to do well. And yeah, so that was my little chat advice of the postgraduate application process, specifically for law, although I think a lot of this can be applied for any discipline. So yeah, that was my experience of applying, and I hope that gives some good advice to people who are interested, because I was very clueless. So yeah, and I will be starting my UCL vlogs, which are very exciting, so stay tuned for all of my UCL London vlogs in the future.